Hello and welcome to Landy's Crypto Corner. Today is February 7th, 2025, and we're looking at Bitcoin as always. We're going to follow up with where we left off on Wednesday's video, and we're going to talk a little bit about where Bitcoin is at on the daily. Then we're going to go and look at the weekly and see what criteria needs to be met for further upside and downside, what the bears and bulls are looking at coming into this weekend and beyond. So for the daily, Bitcoin has been holding up just above $96,000 on a close here. And I do expect, any kind of closures below for Bitcoin to come back down here and test the bottom side of the range again. So we do have our daily downtrend still well intact. We do not have a closing low in yet. We had our higher high swing up here. We did get our equal high closes on a closing basis at the top. We had the lower low swing with just about the equal low closes here, followed by our lower high. So we have lower low, lower high, lower low. Now for full trend, we'd be looking for a low to be set, whether it's here or lower, and then another lower high. But, Bitcoin's just ranging around. Now, again, this is a pretty wide range, much like we had spring to summer last year. And in this case, we are just seeing, we did see some lower lows over here, but we're just kind of seeing, Bitcoin kind of hanging out in a general range between, roughly 89 to 92 on the bottom side here to around that 101 to 104 with some wicks above to 106 there and 109 to the top side here. Not too much has changed. I know the market is kind of frazzled right now. A lot of market participants on crypto, Twitter, and X. But, something that I kind of want to point out before we even dive a little bit further into this is, we do have exchange reserves continuing to fall right off the map here. So, we had our 2024 kind of hash rate just really dive kind of straight down on the daily here. And this, of course, this started all the way back in, let's go over here. This started all the way back in, of course, January of last year, coming into February, where we did see the ETFs launching over here, where we had a high on Bitcoin. This is closing price, but the high was $49,000, a tap on the monthly at 38.5, and then Bitcoin just rocketed up and began to consolidate all spring, summer, and into fall of 2024. And we saw that, we saw Bitcoin reserves on exchanges continue to fall. And then once we started to hit in and around September, coming into the October timeframe, just before the election here in the United States, Bitcoin was kind of going sideways. It was still sideways and down in a downtrend in terms of exchange reserves, and then boom, down right before, and then of course after the election here, and then a big leg down in exchange reserves here, kind of continuing in this range up here, kind of between mid to upper 80s, and then of course over $100,000 there. Coins are just flowing out of the exchanges, and this is actually pretty bullish as it stands right now. But it does mean that any little bit of inflow and spot selling, because there is a much lower amount of Bitcoin on the exchanges, does create volatile moves. So when we see just even these little blips up or sideways, stagnant, coins aren't outflowing, and we're starting to get some selling pressure on exchanges, it moves price dramatically. So understand the relationship there. Where would Bitcoin need to close to set a low here and kind of avoid some further downside in this current range? Well, we can define that really easily here. The other day, locally here, it would have been above the 99,230 level. I would say that it's probably safe to assume that we'll get most indicators throwing a closing low. If we did see price hold on to the lows here and then close above there, but the criteria that I need to see is basically $100,000, which was the Friday high. Of course, the Saturday candle is open, and this range right here where Bitcoin is kind of throwing wicks here. We had a higher low close right here on the daily. We had Bitcoin trying to hold this up, but more importantly, we have like this one higher low here. Of course, this was followed by a very large doji candle on December 5th before, putting in a higher high on a close, another higher low, and then moving up to make new highs above that 104 all-time high at the time. Of course, Bitcoin did slice through it. And one of the reasons why, I had a few questions about why 96, why this upper 96, 95 to $96,000. Well, we had the higher low here, but when Bitcoin went to put in the lows here, this was the criteria for setting the low over here. It was also the criteria for setting the low over here. So we had an area where we saw it was support on a close open basis, and then it was criteria for setting a low, not just once, but one and two times, so three times to try and set that low, those lows there, right around this area, and then it has been acting as support, one big slice through, and then support, support three times, a little bit of liquidity grabs below, two more times here. So $96,000 is the inflection point that we've been talking about for a little while here. I want to say it's been a couple weeks ever since we saw this criteria for the low being set over here when Bitcoin did spike down to $89,000 in our red zone there. So if that area is lost, and I would say that you can add additional criteria on a daily close below right now around 95 and a half or so, and losing the lower second standard deviation rather on a close, which is coming in at 95. So essentially 95 to 96 here. Then I would look for expansion back into the top side of this support down here at $92,000, where you see the lower third standard deviation coming in. Anywhere below there, we're looking at Bitcoin running this low at around that 91,200 into the meat of this red zone down here, which is roughly coming in at $92,000 to $88,700, where of course we did see that $89,000 front run, that $300 front run of this higher low swing here from the move up. Now, that is kind of what I'd be looking for if 96 fails, and I would give it some room now, $95,000 to $96,000. If we do see Bitcoin start to regain the lower first standard deviation of the Bollinger Bands here on the daily, even in some lower term timeframes, we're likely looking at it, probably trying for, this $99,000 to $100,000 level, as the lower first is there at 98,175. I would just pay attention in lower term timeframes relative to the daily to see if that's what some of the possibilities are in those lower term timeframes. Anywhere above $100,000, I'd be looking for the basis band to get tested about $1,000 above. So 101 to 101,200 here by the basis band and the bottom side of the overhead resistance. And then, of course, anywhere above there, I do think that it's fair game up to the 1272 extension from the prior cycle high to the bear market low, which is coming in at just shy of 104 here at 103,645 to 104, which is that wick high over here from December 5th. Above there, we could see it throw a wick or a pin at the 104.5. Any closes above 104, though, I would be looking to that upper first here, possibly coming in to test just above there to the close open lower high up here. Anywhere above there, 104 to 106, 106 to 108 as the primary green zone here for what's governing the highs at the moment. Yes, we do have a higher high anywhere above the 108. I'm looking 108 to 110 up there. And then we see that 110 is slightly above there. And we have the wick high or the all-time high currently at 109,360. So I'm looking for closes. So if Bitcoin, for instance, drops 95 to 96 or 96 right here locally, just kind of goes sideways with smaller candle bodies or something like that, smaller wicks, I would be looking for the lower second to get tagged. That's currently at 95. And if Bitcoin starts to trade below there and it hasn't already hit, and closed below there, more importantly, and hasn't already come down to test the lows, somewhere around the low $90,000 to $92,000 region by the most recent low and the top side of this support down here, I would look for it to get tested if it hasn't already, quite frankly, and possibly lower, especially if it's on expansion. Below the lower second is going to be the criteria governing that for more aggressive expansion to the downside. And then back to the upside here, anywhere above 101 and the basis band on the daily, if we haven't already seen price head up to like the 104, and slightly above, we can call it 104 to 105, the overhead resistance there at the top side of this yellow zone, then I'd look for it to get tested, especially on closes and setting any kind of a low here, providing the $96,000 area does hold. So this criteria is good for at least the Saturday candle. Maybe likely if it doesn't trade any higher than this on the Saturday candle, it'll be good for the Sunday candle too, and the weekly close candle that relates to it. We'll have to kind of gauge that because we do have a lower high close on the weekly in place already. But for the daily, it's probably going to be around $100,000, $100,200 here. And then we, look, and we can look further up. It doesn't do anything for the structural downtrend there until we see closes above 106.44. So realistically, what are bulls looking for? Maybe a tighter range. This bounces up, puts in a low, maybe a lower high, equal high up here. Tries to put in equal low, higher low structure, and then take out whatever lower high there is to change structure on the daily. Otherwise, it's just going to be a continuation to the downside because as it stands right now, Bitcoin needs to take that 106, we'll call it 500 up here in the green zone to actually break the downtrend. And then from there, we still need to see higher low, equal low structure develop for a trend reversal. So just understand kind of the lay of the land with that stuff. Let's go ahead and get rid of this on the daily. We'll go ahead and take a look at where RSI is. Nothing too interesting here. Could bulls set, get some bullish divergence here off of some of the area over here? Sure. Yeah. Is it going to do much in terms of, what we've been talking about? Maybe it's good enough to set a low. We would have to see the low set, in my opinion. It's good enough to pop things up, but, it would be to some of the areas overhead, 101 to 104 on any closes above 100. And that is generally what I'd be looking for because we need to see like regular bullish divergence develop, in my opinion, to really start getting Bitcoin out of this range to the top side. That doesn't mean that it can't. But in my opinion, that's kind of what we would need to see. Let's go ahead and take a look at where the edge of the bullish control zone is here. The edge of the bullish control zone is actually at 107, almost $108,000. So it's essentially, I guess we will turn back on the local support area, support and resistance zones of interest, as I call them. We're essentially looking at Bitcoin possibly getting in and around that lower high and above, up here to this top side of the green zone here, which would look good, especially if it could trend break on a closing basis. Again, on a closing basis, we need to see closes above 106.44 as it stands right now. That will change if we see another lower high. And first, we need to see the low being set in the first place. So don't think like this is an immediately actionable setup at this particular moment. I think it does take a little while. Even if we do see price rise, it's probably going to take a little bit longer if we see price fall. In this case, we can take a look at where the bearish control zone is down here. The edge of the bearish control zone is at $94,000. And just in case, we see Bitcoin leg up over the weekend, maybe there's some good news, buyers come back into the market, they set the low and start pushing up higher. Maybe they're pushing up to the highs, they slice through the yellow zone overhead, 101 to 104, start heading towards 104, 106, start pushing up to the 108 region. We get above the bullish control zone. Where is the kind of extreme level up here? If it starts to break out from here, like right here, right now, because this will change, we're looking at about $137, almost $138,000 on at the extreme levels up here at like an 80 read of RSI, even more critical levels up there. We're looking at, about 160 or so. And that starts to get into territory that we've talked about on the fibs for, some of our areas of interest, kind of skipping over some of this, at about 128 to 130 up here. But realistically, then we start looking for, and this is one of the reasons why I do think we're going to consolidate a little bit longer. Overall, I think, if we see Bitcoin starting to trade back above the local highs, we're going to start to see that $130,000 1414 as a play. And then more long term, we probably see any closes above there, probably start safe to target around the 150 range longer term, and then anywhere above there, like 173 to 175 at the 1618 up there. That is the prior cycle high to bear market low Fibonacci extension. And it's starting to look as though, on some of the time frames like I've shown and will show again on Monday, it's starting to look like, those are going to be with the 130 and above kind of checkpoint zone, kind of the areas of interest to the upside. To the downside, we probably should know what some of the more extreme levels to the downside are, just in case the range does resolve to the downside. And bear critical zone is around $72,000 right here. So that's the bottom side of the bearish control zone. That's a retest of the prior consolidation, that 6-month consolidation from spring all the way through summer into fall. That's the top side area, about $70,000 to $75,000. So that would be an area of interest. Now this will update day to day, but generally speaking, we do have confluences. Obviously, if we were to get expansion to the downside out of this range, that's the next big support area. Critical zone down there is at 56,421. Now I do think this is going to update, and these numbers for the bottom side critical areas are going to move up, as well as the top side critical areas are going to move up the longer the Bitcoin consolidates in this zone. So I expect the numbers on the lows to rise and the numbers on the highs to rise a little bit here day after day. We'll see. We'll track it. This is a handy indicator. You can, I believe, still get this. This is an RSI. There's lots of RSIs. I like this one because it's got a nice readout here. I want to say this one is this the caretaker? Is this a caretaker? Yeah, this is caretaker's RSI. So this is a paid indicator, but there's plenty of RSIs that have some of these metrics in it. Like you could look up like advanced RSI and you'll find that stuff. I personally like this. A lot of the developers that develop for Eric Crown, Crown's Crypto Cave, they're fantastic developers and have created some really cool indicators that I believe he still sells. You'd have to go check. I think he still sells some of these. Maybe he's kind of changed his indicator sets that he uses over there, but I think they still sell these if you're ever interested. But there is free versions of this stuff. I don't want to just use these indicators and not have anybody know what they are. You can use or just search advanced RSI and you'll see many indicators that are like this. I just happen to really be a big fan of the developers over there, as Caretaker did allow me to pilfer some of his code with his blessings for my indicator here, specifically the BBWP and some of the moving average stuff that's built into this indicator. So big shout out to him. I keep getting questions about that RSI, so did want to talk about that for a moment. We do see that on the daily regular stochastic that we see a flip up, and of course this is also a paid indicator because it's got it's got some other bells and whistles in it, specifically a DMI and ADX, but there is the BA pig reverse stoke and many other stoke indicators that have pivots for kind of when the stoke is going to turn, specifically the K crossing over the D read. And this is a regular stoke, so it's closing price momentum is what it's measuring, and not momentum of RSI, which is a normal stoke RSI. This is just closing price momentum. And we do see that it is crossed up, but we do see that the pivot here is 98,269. Nice. What does that mean? Well, that means that because Bitcoin is trading below it, we could see a cross right back down. Again, I would say above $96,000 on closes for Bitcoin. It's probably going to try to set a low anywhere below, and it's going to run this wick low and likely down into the support down there, right? So just some confluence there for us on some of those time frames, or some on the daily time frame with some of those indicators rather. Let's go ahead and get rid of this and actually go check on the weekly criteria. What do we want to see on a weekly if we're bullish, if we're bearish? Well, if we're bearish, we want to see the weekly close just like this and then start to head down for a tap on the basis band, which is rising towards price. So unless it were to do it this weekend, which by the way is at 87,300, so just below the bottom side of our 88,700 area, we do have some criteria. Let's go ahead and actually look at that. And again, we're going to turn back on the local areas. We have the daily levels here. There is, outside of the bottom side of this zone on the daily, we do have the 88.7. That's this higher low over here. Then we have some candle structure around 87,340 on the daily to that $85,000 wick low. That's the first bear candle that was put in after the expansion out of the prior range up to the current range. So $85,000 being an inflection point anywhere below there, and it's probably going to get nasty for the bulls. I would still be looking like mid to low 80s and then mid to upper 70s, which of course would be a retest of this bottom side here. So anywhere below 85, we're looking to mid to low 80s, which is kind of in here. And then of course, anywhere below the low 80s, we're looking mid to upper 70s, which is kind of in here. So now we're seeing the confluence with the weekly having the basis band right around the bottom side of our range here. So could it just swing down and hit that? Absolutely. Bears would actually like to see a close like this. Bears don't want to see it. Well, bears are kind of in control on the daily, but it's still a range. I wouldn't get too excited. This is just consolidating sideways at this point. If we do start to see 93.5 close below on the weekly, if we haven't already seen the lows ran to the basis band, we will see that basis band hit. And quite honestly, the basis band on the weekly being at 87.3, right at those daily close opens, a little bit of a consolidation on the daily with some order blocks. It's fair game to the downside, whether it's this week or next week, until conditions improve. I do want to see, if you're bullish, I want to see closes back above 102,167. That is the upper first standard deviation. That's going to probably move up to around where the actual, it's right at the close open. It's going to move above the close open on the weekly. So, bulls back above 102,500 or so. That would look good to go and run the close open all-time high up here at 104,500 or so. And then, start working our way to, 108 to the highs there, just shy of 110 again. But, this is going to go, if Bitcoin closes like this, we're going to see the basis rise. We're going to see the upper first continue to rise, maybe start to flatten out a little bit, right around the 103 to 104 range, in my opinion. So again, top side of that yellow zone that we were looking at earlier. We do have some confluence, by the way, for the extreme reads to the downside for the daily. When looking at the weekly, we have the lower first standard deviation of the Bollinger Bands at 72,600, right at the top side of our prior range before the nice breakout. I wouldn't want to see Bitcoin dropping, if it starts to drop 93,500, it's in danger of closing below the $89,000. Well, that would present, a closing setup that is bearish, with a lower high close and a lower low close. It's still it's still a higher high swing, right? Would it look like more consolidation? Absolutely. And, one of the bigger things that I'd be looking at and referencing is maybe go one time frame down to the 5-day, and you can see that we are moving from aggressive expansion to compression here. Now, if Bitcoin doesn't resolve itself below the lower second, which is currently at $86,000, and still I would look for it to try and interplay with some of the mid to upper 80s there, and then gauge it. But if it starts to close below there, we're looking for expansion again down to retest here, or up to the highs here at, just shy of 108, and he closes above there on the 5-day, and we're looking for expansion to the next leg. The big thing is if it just kind of goes sideways, this will form a range. and it will be a very easy to understand and very easy to read range for expansive posture. So compression into expansion. And I would say at minimum, I wouldn't necessarily be looking for this to, like, even if it were to head to the downside or head to the upside, to initially set off that expansion on a closing basis. I would look at the top side as being rejective and the bottom side as being supportive initially when looking at this coming into a compression, expansion into compression. And you can even see the upper third there is at 113, and the lower third is there at $80,000. So again, any drop of 85, I'm looking, mid to low 80s, and bounces from there. Any sweeps above, 110, upper third, 112 to 115 is kind of the zone of interest above there initially, and then we kind of look for it to hold the upper second on a closing basis to get that expansion, or on the downside moves, hold the lower second as resistance and get that expansion down. Initially, we typically see these areas as rejective areas, so as a rejection at the highs and a support at the lows. We even see the lower first standard deviation there, right around last week's swing low. So we have the swing low at that 91,200 rather. Right around that 91,200 is where the lower first is. And we have basically the weekend to close this candle too. So we've got the Saturday candle. This will close with the weekly candle. So it's something that maybe I'll touch on again on Monday. And let's go ahead and take a look at the 5-day actually, in terms of where we need to see a pivot for this current 5-day session that's going to close with the weekly. Yeah, it's 103,200 essentially, and then the weekly is going to be 101. So it's still pretty downside angled, but if we start to see Bitcoin put in a daily low, there's the potential next week that we could see a little bit of a recovery, low set, start searching higher. Maybe it ends the end of the week somewhere higher that can flip the momentum pivots around here. Otherwise, it's pressure down. So just be prepared, especially if you're in altcoins or meme coins. Be prepared. Yeah, that's going to be it. I hope that you all have a wonderful weekend, and of course have a wonderful morning, afternoon, and evening, no matter where you are in the world. Please trade safe. And of course, as always, stay safe. With all of that being said, Landy out. Take care.